So in the book of Genesis today, first book of the Bible, we have finally reached a point where we enter into a story and we're like, wait, what is going on here? We have cities being destroyed. We have daughters having sex with their father. And this is the first book of the Bible, and I'm halfway through it, and what is going on? And this is a good time to point out the fact that we will encounter stories in the Bible this year that will make you scratch your head and say, what is going on here? And what you need to notice when we encounter those stories is the subtle judgment that comes up in our heart toward God. That might sound odd, but it's what happens. Especially if we're on our first trip through the whole Bible. Like, if this is the first time we're going, like, where we've made a commitment, we're like, okay, I've placed my faith in this book, but I've never read it, and now I'm going to read every word, and now I'm going to understand what's in this book. We begin to realize that if we've never been on the trip, on the journey through the Bible, that we have sort of these prejudices. We think that there is an angry God who's vengeful and wants to smite humanity, and we need to meet him and find out how to fear him properly. And then we have a dichotomy. We have Jesus showing another way of actually being in the world altogether, and we're trying to mash those together because Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, these are the same being. And so how does this all equate? And so we get this angry God thing going on, and we fear the Lord because he's going to be so angry. And so this is the first time today we come up against one of those notions. We see a story in the Bible that just rings all the wrong bells. So let's just go back and look through the story real quick and try to find the place where it is that our hearts have turned toward judgment at God, or maybe we're looking at a story that then tells us something completely different. So let's begin with the fact that God comes to meet the person that he's in covenant with, Abraham, and they have this meal, and then God is leaving to go see what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, down in the valley. And God stops, according to the story in Genesis, and thinks to himself, should I keep this from Abraham? Should I keep this from the one that I'm in covenant with? And he decides that he shouldn't keep it from the one that he's in covenant with, and so he tells Abraham what his intentions are. And then what do we see? A man, a human being, Abraham, approaches God, the creator of all things, the all-powerful one, and begins a negotiation, right? Would you go down there and wipe that city, those cities out if there are 50 righteous people? And the Lord reveals his heart. No, I wouldn't do that. Well, how about 45? No, I wouldn't do that. How about 40? How about 30? How about 20? How about 10? And we see that God is revealing his heart in the story, because this is where God is speaking for himself in the story. I'm not about the business of destroying people. I'm about the business of eradicating evil and wickedness. And as the story progresses, we get a sense of the wickedness that he's talking about. I think that, like, no matter what else we might say, that we would probably all agree that if you're going into a village and the outcome is that you are going to be gang raped by the men of the city, that's evil. And so we just read the story, so we know how the story goes, and we have this, Lot trying to protect the angels who he knows are beings sent from God, but the only thing that he feels like he can barter with is to throw his virgin daughters out the door and let them endure the gang rape, which makes you go, hold on a second. What in the world is something like this doing in the Bible? Like, this isn't the right way to live. Why would Lot do something like that? And then the story goes on, right? The girls, as it turns out, are betrothed. They're engaged to be married. And so Lot's trying to get everyone that is connected to him out of the city, but the guys, they won't go. They don't believe him. They think he's joking. And so it ends up that Lot and his wife and his two daughters are the only ones that escape the city, and they're running. And then, of course, the story's famous. So Lot's wife looks back. She's turned into a pillar of salt, and so there's only Lot and his 2 daughters who are fleeing for their lives. And everything that they had, all of their possessions, all of their wealth, all of their standing, everything is wiped from the face of the earth, along with their home and everyone that they knew. So they are completely on their own in this valley, and they end up in a cave in the mountains, right? And we know the story. The 2 daughters decide that the best course of action is to have sex with dad and see if they can get pregnant. So it's a pretty disturbing story that we can go, why is this in the Bible? And, where is God in all of this? Well, God was in the beginning of the story speaking to Abraham, telling Abraham that he wasn't going down to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy righteous people. In fact, had there been 10 righteous people, the story wouldn't be in the destruction wouldn't have happened. And so there weren't. The people who could maybe be considered righteous, Lot and his 2 daughters and his wife, they got out. Of course, mom isn't there anymore. And so the daughters are thinking, what are we supposed to do? And if we kind of get contextual here, we can understand the dilemma that they were in. This family that had been reduced to poverty, like everything was destroyed, they were foreigners. These 2 daughters were foreigners, and Lot was the only family member that could protect them, especially in the culture of that time. And he's getting older, so there's no one for them. And if Lot were to perish, and they were obviously in a pretty precarious situation, they had lost everything and were hiding in a cave in the mountains, so things were pretty bad. And so they're thinking to themselves, this isn't the desirable choice, this is the only choice. We need another male heir. We need someone that can speak for us and can have property. And yeah, we can get into patriarchy, we can get into all that stuff. But why don't we just say this is what was going on then? This is how they understood the world to be. This is how it was to live at this time in the book of Genesis, which is a long time ago. And so the outlook for the daughters was to either have a male heir somewhere, or what was going to happen is their father would be killed or would die, and they would be taken and probably live a life of prostitution. So they did what they did. And we can look at what they did and say, that's not how it's supposed to go. And yes, it's not. But we need to look at a story like this and say, why am I judging God about this story? Why am I saying, there, I told you, see, this kind of stuff is in the Bible? I mean, when Lot fled and only had his daughters, why didn't they finish climbing up the mountain that they were hiding in to get to the top where their uncle, Abraham, was living? Why didn't they go back to the family that they had? We don't have the answer to that question. But why would we blame God for the choices that they made? Remember back earlier in the story when Lot and Abraham got together because they had grown too wealthy to stay together? And everybody was kind of fighting, and so they decided to part ways so that there would be room enough for them both? It was Lot who picked what he thought was the best option for himself. He picked the best of the land and went and lived in it. And this is what happened. Why is it God's fault? Was God anything but a redeemer in this story? He told Abraham what he was going to do, and then he went and did it. And why would Abraham ask these questions of the Lord if not to protect his own family? So what God did was go down into the midst of this debauchery and rescue Abraham's family and get them out. What we don't see in the story is how that they fell down and worshiped the Lord and asked for counsel on what to do and were led on the path that they should go, right? They went their own way, and what happened. Which brings us to a little touchy point where we're going to have to realize as we continue to take this journey that it is absolutely going to touch all of the soft spots of our lives. And this is a good time to realize how much blame we place on God for things that He hasn't done. It's incredible, the trash heap of things that we throw upon the Lord that He had nothing to do with. And we can say He is sovereign and He knows all, and so He could preempt things, and yet there was that story back at the very, very beginning, the second day together, where Adam and Eve are in the garden, staring at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they were instructed not to eat from it. And then they did, and they were allowed to make that choice, and that choice was allowed to matter. We are each created in the image of God, and God is a creator, and He creates things. And because we are created in His image and it is hardwired into who we are, so do we. And every day we are writing that story and creating what our destiny is going to look like. We get to make choices, and they get to matter. And this story that we've just read in the book of Genesis shows us, once again, this reality. Not everything is God's fault. And when we just throw everything that we get ourselves into onto God like it's His fault, then how is it that we can have a trusting, loving relationship with Him? How is it that we will walk through this year with a God that we do not trust and do not know?